Solomon does have advice for us in the book of Ecclesiastes. So how do we live? So first of all, let's read 8:14-15. We looked at this a good bit last week. John and Brenda, those two verses.
There's something else meaningless that occurs on earth. Righteous men who get what the wicked deserve, and wicked men who get what the righteous deserve. This, too, I say, is meaningless.
So that's the basis that we've established here. Now we go on from this. Brenda.
So I commend the enjoyment of life, because there is nothing better for a person under the sun than to eat and drink and be glad. Then joy will accompany them in their toil all the days of the life God has given them under the sun.
Okay. Now, qualification. So what's Solomon say to do? Enjoy life. Is he saying go into sin? No, he's not saying go into sin. But he is saying enjoy life. What's he say here that is life that we can enjoy? Work. Yeah. So where do we see that there, Laura?
Towards the end of 15, it says, then joy will accompany him in his work all the days of the life God has given him.
Yeah. So God's sovereign, and God gives each person every day they have under the sun, right? While they're living on the earth, while they're not, in a tomb and not under the sun anymore, and their souls in heaven or hell. And then, but when we work, what do we get? And it's a little bit further up in that verse.
Food and drink.
Food and drink. Who makes food and drink? God. And who gives it to you? God. Yep. There we go. Here's something no one can take from you. Right? You can't determine the results. You can be a running back who gets 3,000 yards in a season and not win the running back award. Right? Those kind of things happen. No one's ever gotten 3,000 yards in a season, but I mean, the deserving don't always win the awards. But can you work? And you work with the ability that you have in yourself? No. How do you have that ability to work? God gave it to you. And when you work, what happens? In this verse. You get food and drink. That's something people can't take from you. We're going to see this. We're going to go through all these verses. This is huge in Ecclesiastes. Life may suck, but you can work. And when you work, you'll get paid. Or if you're working for yourself, you'll earn things, and then you can buy food and you can buy drink. And God has created that, and he's created you. And when you eat that food and when you drink that drink, no one can take that from you like an award that you deserve that you didn't get. Okay, that's separate from, that's divorced from the unfairness of life. Okay, you can work, and you can eat, and you can drink, and you can. So he says, I commend the enjoyment of life. Nothing is better for a man under the sun than to eat and drink. And how are you to feel emotionally when you eat and drink? Be glad. Okay? So we're not saying anything crazy here. We're just reading this verse. Nothing is better under the sun for you than to eat and drink and be glad. That's it. You could be living in a shanty, but you can work, and you get a little bit of money, and you can buy a Twinkie. And you bite that Twinkie and you say, oh man, this is so good. Thank you, God. I was hungry. Right? That's something someone can't take away from you, your ability to work. Now, are there extreme examples like you become a quadriplegic and your mind turns into you can't think anymore? Sure, but we're not looking at the exceptions here. We're looking at what's true. And even if it's and so you think about this with certain abilities. Some people have ability to do work that earns them tons and tons of money. We live in a society with the proliferation of with film and recording. So you can be an actor or a music artist, and you can earn tons of money. And now you can be a very undeserving artist and earn more than the Beatles for a hit song because they didn't have the distribution, right, in their day, in the 60s, that you do now. But you can work as a greeter in Walmart, and they will pay you. They'll give you a check. And with that check, you can buy food. And right soul says, thank you, God. I know this isn't Ruth's Chris Steakhouse, but I don't deserve anything. All right, like Jesus said in Luke 17:10, so also with you, when you've done everything you were told to do, you should say, Lord, we are unworthy servants. We've only done our duty. All right? He doesn't owe us anything, but he gives us the ability to work, and we can eat, and we can drink. And Solomon says, and be glad. Don't be ungrateful. Don't say, all I have here is this food and this drink. Nope. Just be glad you got food and drink. It's something someone can't take from you. And he's given you the ability to work, and that ability and that command to work was given in the garden before the fall, right? Tend the garden. Work is good. And so Solomon says, work, eat, drink, be glad. Joy will accompany you all the days of your life as you work and eat and be glad in that. Okay? And so we are, as believers, to be grateful people who are grateful to work, grateful to have a bite to eat, grateful to have something to drink. And we don't want to be, snot-nosed kids who are complaining about, what we don't have. Yeah, Bill.
Kind of reminds me of the Apostle Paul in Philippians chapter 4, talking about contentment. He talks about all the things that he's gotten and has gone without, and still says, I've learned to be content no matter what. In other words, he's saying, I got those basics that you're talking about.
Yeah. And that's a real comfort. God's in control of our lives. He gives us food and drink. And even if we were to die of starvation, he takes care of us then too. He brings us to himself. And he says, hey, John, I'm going to starve you to death and bring you to myself. That's a good deal. It is. Starving to death and being with him is much better than being rich and having a buffet of all my favorite foods on this earth. Those won't compare to what he has for me, right? Yeah, Matthew.
So, how literal is this verse? Because, I'm thinking that if you take an abstract view, it seems like Solomon is saying existence is the reward in and of itself, because you're capable of working and you're capable of eating and things like that.
But he's saying to do those things.
And so that's what I'm saying. So is it literally the reward is in the ability to work, in the eating? Because I know you said not to focus on the exceptions, but
there's a joy in the work.
Right.
And you kind of see that, in the text here. Nothing is better for a man than joy will accompany him in his work or in his labors, as some translations say. Yeah.
Because, for instance, I know someone who has said they find eating annoying, and that's my brother who said that. And to me, if this is a literal interpretation, it's almost, I don't want to say quote sinful, but it seems to be going against the wisdom of the verse. Whereas if you take an approach that it's the existence that's the gift, that's what you should be happy for, the existence
Uh-huh.
and the ability then to subsequently do things that were, prevalent in the time of that writing and stuff. I guess that's like
It does exist, but we're to follow in that. So it's like what Paul says, in I think it's 1 Timothy, that we eat and drink and we give thanks for the food, and that food is good. And I know your brother's obese.
he's very large.
When Nate was here, he went for a physical. He was required by his employer, I think it was First Citizens, to go for a physical, and he was told he was obese. So I guess Nate was never even someone you'd say chubby.
He's built like you.
Yeah, and so I think Nate has very dense bones.
Argue that the density is elsewhere.
we still kid him about that. No, but that is, and so when someone here's how I try to apply this. I work from home, and so a lot of times I work through lunch. And I'm eating lunch. But I'm working as I eat. Or sometimes I'm taking off from work as I'm eating, but I'm looking on my phone and doing other things. And I think, you know what? I need to enjoy and rejoice in this food and this drink that God's given me. And that's a thing we need to renew our minds with. That food is good. Food is nutrition for us, except for black olives.
So terrible.
Yes.
You're so right.
Yes. Olives are stupid.
Blessings to you, John.
Yes. My dad and brother loved olives, and I always wanted to love olives because my brother was older, and I just, I wanted to be like my dad and brother, and I could never do it. I still can't do it. Yeah. But no, that's the biblical perspective of food is God has created this for us, and we're to enjoy this. This is a good gift He gives to us. Now we don't want to overindulge, but we want to say food is good, and it's a gift of God to us, and so we rejoice, we eat, and we drink, and we're glad in it. This is, think about this kind of like an anti-evolutionary. God puts all these things on the earth. Betsy just commented the other day. We talk about this all the time. How did anyone decide when they saw coffee bean to roast it, to grind it, and to pour hot water over it, and then to drink it? How did anyone grind up wheat grain, add yeast and sugar and water, knead it and bake it, and then it's bread? How did you figure that? I mean, we think it's all accidents, right? Everything's an accident. But God provides all these things on the earth that we can eat that are actually nutritious for us, that heal our body, provide for us the energy we need, and we actually like most of it taste-wise too. And so we rejoice in that. God's created the earth for us, that we would have things not only that we would see and enjoy, but be able to eat and drink and enjoy and say, oh, God, this is so good. Thank you. Yeah, Manny.
I was thinking off of kind of what you were saying. It's like is the work create, or does the availability of work create? And then I was thinking, like, we were praying for Donovan for a job for 6 months.
Right.
Like, it's hard to say, like, oh man, have gladness in the pursuit of a job, right? But maybe that's right? Like,
right. Yeah. So if I'm
now, I might not have a job. But
right. So if I'm him, I say, God, this really stinks. I don't have a job. I'm not earning an income. But here's the work You've given me now to look for a job, and so to try to have a grateful heart about that. Well, at the same time, saying this is not where I want to be, and this stinks. But God, this is what You have for me now, and I'll rest in Your sovereign plan. Yeah. Okay. Let's see this again. Let's go flip back to 3. We'll look at verses 12 and 13. And so Solomon points to these things that we can do that no one can take from us. People can take rewards and what we deserve away from us. But there are certain things that are just good. And that Solomon says, so pursue this. So 12 and 13. So we're to, Narrans, would you two read these two verses?
I know that there is nothing better for men to do, men than to be happy and to do good while they live.
That each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all their toil. This is the gift of God.
Yeah. Get that? So this is part of the question. It's not just the ability or the existence of we can do work, but it's in the work. Satisfaction in our toil. I remember sitting on the Liberty Street on the under my basketball hoop on the grass. So the concrete at the driveway ends, and then there was grass. And my dad had been working. I think my dad and I had been raking leaves. We'd rake them onto a tarp and take them down to the street at the end. And he said, my dad was a hard worker, but you never complained, right? Because you don't complain. and so when he said, let's take a rest, it was like, oh, yes. But you didn't act too happy because you didn't want to act like a wimp. But he'd say, let's take a rest. And he said, John, come over here. And he just sat down on the ground and he said, lean back. And we just lay there on the grass and the dirt there. And he looked over and said, doesn't this feel good? Sorry. Doesn't this feel good? And he said he used to sit, with his dad. He was a dairy farmer growing up. And he used to sit and they'd work, and my dad told, the one thing my mom realized, my dad's he died of a aortic aneurysm. So his aorta was leaking the last month of his life. He didn't know it. And then it burst while I was at work. But my mom said in retrospect, Carl wasn't getting up, as my dad, Carl wasn't getting up on Saturday. He was getting up like at 8:00 on Saturdays that last month. He always got up like at 5:30 or 6:00 on a Saturday and found something to do. My brother's still like this. He's always working. But satisfaction, but my dad pointed out there's satisfaction in your toil. My favorite movie, perhaps, or second favorite, is called Breaking Away. It takes place in Bloomington, Indiana. 1979, great movie. But the dad says to his son, he makes his son work for him. And his dad sells used cars. And the movie is just set up. It's Dennis Quaid, Dennis Christopher, Daniel Stern, and Jamie Jervis. Anyway, they decide they've graduated from high school and they have a pact that they're not going to work for a year. And so it's about this year. It's a wonderful movie. If you can find it, watch it. But the dad gets fed up and he says, boy, you're going to work for me. So he gets him and he washes. And so all day long, he washes the cars at his dad's used car lot. And he tells his son, he says, you're going to work. And at the end of the day, you're going to be tired. And that's good. It's good. He says, when he's telling his kid he's going to work for him, he says, you're never miserable. You need to be miserable. But that's it. Solomon says, it's good. There's satisfaction in toil. There's satisfaction in doing work and doing good work and working hard because we work because we love our neighbor. We produce a product or a service that blesses our neighbor. That's what work is. Okay, so if you're doing a product or a service that curses your neighbors, if you're a pornographer, get out of that business because you're doing nothing but evil for the people around you. That's illegitimate work. But if you're baking bread, you're doing a wonderful thing. It's like the people in the food trucks. They know this joy. They love making this food and they know they can make something that's really good. And they make it and they hand it to you. You buy it and they hand it to you and they watch you eat it and they watch you stand in the dirt of their lot, on a corner somewhere, Pool Road and Smithfield, right? And they say, my food is so good that they're standing on dirt eating it. There's satisfaction in my toil. and they're enjoying it. And they come to me and say, oh, this is so good. Thank you. Right? That's satisfaction in our toil. We're producing products and services that are good. And Solomon says, no one can take that from you. No one can take from you working hard and mowing that grass so that it looks nice. Right? Bob and I had yards across from each other, and every time we mowed our grass, it looked nice. And then that tall fescue would come up when it would rain, and that stuff would grow like 4 inches overnight. And then it didn't look good anymore. But you can take satisfaction and hard work. And the eating and drinking we're able to do from that hard work, which you could say contextually, verse 12, nothing is better for men and women, of course, than to be happy and to do good while they live. That's a little bit more general, but there's also being happy in your labor and doing good. Doing good is labor, right? Yeah, Matthew.
I might be doing this again, but I love overarching principles that are tied up in a nice little bow here. And so it seems like when you give the example of working and you're raking leaves or whatever, or the example of exercise, and it's something I did yesterday.
Yep.
And
there's satisfaction in that.
Yeah.
We exercise and say, man, I didn't want to do that, and it hurt, and I did it.
Right. And then so where I'm going with this, it seems like the overarching principle is when you engage in your purpose as outlined by examples and commandments in the Bible.
Have dominion over the earth. That's our work. Have dominion over the earth. That's given to Adam. That's our purpose as human beings.
With stewardship in there.
Yes.
Within the appropriate rules, that is where the purpose, the enjoyment of being man, generally man, woman, and that's where you get the enjoyment. For instance, we mentioned enjoying nature and all that.
Yeah.
There's no reason that I should look out and see a tree and gain enjoyment from that, except that that's the way we were created.
And by the way, secular physiologists and psychologists have done all these studies, and they know that when you see nature, your mood lifts. And they talk about that. They don't talk about that about God, but they talk about this. That's just true, and that's a connection that God's given to us.
They come up with ridiculous explanations like the color calms us because when we were cavemen, we'd run away from saber-tooth tigers. No, this is literally what they say and stuff. It's ridiculous. And so, I question whether that 8:14 was literal, or is it just another example where when you engage in your purpose in a godly manner, that's where the happiness, that's where the reward, and that's something nobody can take away from you because it's innate in you.
Yes. Good. Okay, next, 5:18-20, so just go forward a little bit. And Blake, you're up. Can you do 18, and then Patterson's Joyce 19, and Faith 20?
And enables him to enjoy them, to accept his lot and be happy in his work. This is a gift of God.
It's seldom reflect on the days of their life because God keeps them occupied with gladness and
So again, you see these themes. We work, we enjoy the food, the drink that God gives us, and this is our lot. We accept our lot in life. This is the skill God's given me to do. And I can do this, and I can help people. This is my lot in life. And that can change through life, what we're doing, but he gives us these tasks, and we are satisfied in the lot that he's given us, the role he's given us for our family, or for our community, or for our company, or whatever. Okay. Next, Jim. Go ahead and turn to 9:7. Yeah, Jim.
Is there any tie between Solomon talking about work and the satisfaction from that, a document or whatever, a conversation. Is there any tie of that creation to some of the joy of that, some of experiencing God's joy in creation? Is there any?
I would say so. I think that's an image of God thing. God works for 6 days, and it's good work, and he's pleased with his work. And so we really see that parallel here in Ecclesiastes. So that's an excellent connection there, that we are functioning. We're an image of God or a reflection of God. God works, he creates what's good, and he's pleased. And so that's what we do as a reflection of him, as images of God on the earth. We work, we create good, we bless people by our work, and we're satisfied in that. So good. Okay, next. And so we're over to, how about Stenitz, you two, and then Laura, and then Jim.
Ecclesiastes 9:7. Go, eat your food with gladness, and drink your wine with a joyful heart, for it is now that God favors what you do.
Always be clothed in white, and always anoint your head with oil.
Enjoy life with your wife, whom you love, all the days of this meaningless life that God has given you under the sun, all your meaningless days. For this is your lot in life, and in your toilsome labor under the sun.
Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. For in the grave, where you are going, there is neither working nor planning nor knowledge nor wisdom.
What a great summary of this, that we're talking about, right? So starting in verse 7 there, eat your food with gladness, drink your wine with a joyful heart, and just be grateful for what God's given you. For it is now that God favors what you do. This is confirmation. As you eat and drink, God favors me. He's created an earth and given me drink and food, and he's placed it in my hands. This is why we don't covet. We accept our lot. What has God placed in my hands? And we say, this is good. Even if it's, Schlitz instead of Guinness, right? That God, is Schlitz still around? Is it? Okay. Yeah, or Pabst Blue Ribbon instead of, yeah. There we go. But God favors. This is proof. One reason we have satisfaction in our food and our drink, it's proof that God favors us. He's given us something that no one can take away. As I have this food in my mouth, probably no one's going to take that away. That's mine. What's something else going on in the passage that God has given you that you can rejoice in? And that's your lot in life. Your wife. Okay? And so that's it. Once you say I do, right? And there are all kinds of crazy things that happen, and not so crazy things that happen that are common in life where that's not the case for us through our lives. But while we have a wife, while we have a husband, we don't look elsewhere, right? We look at that wife that God has given us. We look at that husband that God has given us, and we don't look elsewhere. In Proverbs, Solomon says, rejoice in the wife of your youth. That woman you married typically when you're young, rejoice in her. And that's God's lot for you in life. And so we rejoice instead of looking for something else. And so when we eat food, when we drink, we don't say, oh, but I'd rather have what he has over there. That's coveting. Or I'd rather have that wife or that husband over there. That's coveting. We rejoice in the things that God has given us in our lives. And notice, he calls our days here what in the middle of this passage? Meaningless. So there's going to be all kinds of stuff where we don't get the reward we deserve. But here are some things that no one can take from us. Our work, our food, our drink, hopefully our wife and husband. Sometimes people take those from us, right? That's hard. But we rejoice while he places, and sometimes we're hungry. But when we have those things, we rejoice because he's placed those things in our hands. And then purpose for life and working. Having dominion over the earth. We see that in verse 10. What's he point out in verse 10? So look down there in verse 10. When you die, you can't work. If you're alive, work. That's part of being alive on the earth. You work to love your neighbor. And if you're retired and all you can do is, putter around the retirement home, you do what you can. And there are various kinds of work that you can do. And maybe it's going around and encouraging people in your wheelchair. You go around and you talk to people. Or maybe it's being nice to your nurse who's having a tough time at home. And that's your labor. Because when you're dead, when you're in the grave, you can't do that on the earth anymore. Scripture speaks of praising God in the same way. David often says, God, keep me alive because I can't praise you from the grave. Does he mean his soul won't be in heaven? No, he doesn't mean that. When his son dies, his first son by Bathsheba, he says, he cannot come to me, but I will go to him. David understands when he dies, he will go and see his son in heaven. But what David means is when he says, for who can praise you from the grave? He means, if I'm not here on earth, that's one less person who's giving you the praise you deserve on this earth, which you're not getting enough of. Right? And so same thing here and very much parallel. Our work, while we're alive, we work. And that can change for us. Different jobs, different kinds of things. Or, if you're an NFL athlete, your work's over at 32. Unless you're Tom Brady, then it's over at 41. And so your work changes, what you do. But you do this work because while you're here on the earth, while you're present on the earth, that's what you do. That's what we're here for. To do work because our work is how we can love others by producing products and services or enabling others to produce products and services for the benefit of other people.